Safe courses will teach you the framework, but nobody, and I mean nobody, will teach you how your organization is running safe, Kanban, a form of lean Six Sigma, three DevOps pipelines, and something that somebody built on a spreadsheet from 2019. All right, let's do this. Welcome back to Desperate Radio, where we talk about why work doesn't work. And it does work if you do the right thing and everybody else around you do the right thing. I'm Haas, and I'm here to talk to you about the hybrid model that nobody wants to talk about in Agile or Safe or any other framework, but particularly Safe, since I am a Safe expert. One thing we talked about in the last episode, and I'm going to repeat it again because it's true, and I will say it every time too, is that most organizations that run Safe do not run it clean. And I think it's safe to say that they run their own form of Safe or their own form of Agile. As a matter of fact, you heard me say before about the story where someone says, we know that's how Safe wants you to do, but we are different. This is the real world. And that's true. This happens way more often than people think. It's often Safe mixed with some outdated tooling or three different type of DevOps model from I don't know how long ago. Platform teams that haven't really adapted to Agile or Safe, and legacy process that nobody really wants to touch because they don't know how it started. They don't know where it is right now, and they're not sure if they're gonna break it if they mess with it. State of Agile data consistently shows about 3/4 or more actually practice a hybrid form of Safe or something that's homegrown. The official curriculum, and I know this because I teach it all the time, it assumes that it's just a clean install. Boom, right there. And that's not the case. The problem is that a lot of practitioners are left to figure out on their own how to make that hybrid model work because they've learned how to apply it as just a slip-on type of framework, but that's not really the real world. That is not the real world. That's not how it works in the real world. So they have to figure out on their own, map out their own improvement and transformation by themselves with just a 2 to 4 day workshop that they took, no experience whatsoever, and they're really kind of put in a very tough predicament. Yours truly had to deal with that in my early days of Safe and adoption and transformation. And I'm not embarrassed to say, but don't like to talk about it as much. But I failed a few times on how to implement that. I think one of the early moments of my life of doing any kind of implementation where I had success implementing exactly what I learned how to implement from a very good instructor with the proper roadmap, and the rest of the team was very receptive to what I was saying. Once I moved on to a newer organization and I tried to basically apply the same blueprint that I applied at the previous company, it was not as successful. It was not as, I tell you what, I know, I remember the first thing that I ran into was the tool. I used to using Azure DevOps when I started my Agile career. And when I switched companies, they were using Jira. And I've never used Jira before at that time. My God, that was a long time ago. And I remember looking at Jira and I just rejected it. I rejected it because whatever I knew how to do that was successful, I used that as an excuse why I couldn't move forward. But it wasn't Jira. It wasn't Jira that made me not succeed. It was my rejection of Jira and my rejection of the tool and blaming the tool for not being successful. And here I am admitting to it. Someone at the time said to me, well, a tool is a tool. You should be able to, and I agree. I agree now. I've agreed, of course, a long time ago that is true. A tool is a tool. I do, however, say this. A tool is a tool, but there's a tool for every usage. And there are better tools than others. Let's take a hammer. I know a hammer is a hammer, however you want to use it, but I do feel that there are hammers better used for different jobs, or there are just better hammers out there. And that's just the way I feel. I like Jira, but I like Azure DevOps better. That's how I operate. I even like ClickUp better, but I know ClickUp is not as usable as some major tools out there like Jira or Azure DevOps. So there are some tools out there that I particularly enjoy using over Jira, but that doesn't mean that I still can't use Jira. So I had to learn the hard way that Jira wasn't the reason I didn't succeed. It was my lack of understanding how to implement something over something that already exists, how to implement this safe or agile or scrum or whatever practice that I was trying to implement at the time over something that was already existing, already established. And it wasn't just the tooling that I had a problem with. It was the pushback from the people that I didn't communicate very well. What is the benefit of implementing this? I walked into something that was not favorable to me at all. And I would not wish that on any of my enemies. Not that I have any enemies. Not a lot, I think. It was at that moment that I learned that I need to be flexible. I need to meet folks where they are in order for this to be successful. I can't shove something on people when they're not ready. It's like me trying to fit in a medium-sized shirt or a small-sized shirt. That's never going to happen. Never, ever, ever is it going to happen. So what really helped me understand this better is when I started implementing SAFe correctly. When I started implementing SAFe in the way I believe it was meant to be implemented. And that is, again, meeting people where they are. You can talk about the dual operating system every day until you're blue in the face. That's what SAFe talks about in all of their introductory courses that I teach. And if you want to learn more, check out the NEXU link down below if you're interested. But one of the things that the SAFe talks about is the dual operating system. I actually believe in the dual operating system. The dual operating system talks about how you maintain your hierarchy in your organization, whether you're an executive or a team lead or a division lead or whatever the case may be. But it talks about the operating system for SAFe to work. Who are you in the delivery of the solution or software or goods that this company is producing or this organization is producing? What role do you play? Not what hierarchical role do you play in the structure of the organization, but what role do you play in the delivery of the value? So that's what's meant by the dual operating system. And that's why a lot of times when I talk to folks about roles and responsibilities, I say I really focus more on the functionality. I think a product owner is a good example. It's a more recent example, or a product manager. The functionality of a product manager is someone that manages the product on a program level, from portfolio to art, and translates it down to the teams. So the role of the program manager is to help consume what the information or what the need is for the consumer or the customer on a big picture that is to be delivered across multiple PIs, and they need to translate what that means to the teams. So the idea is that there's functionalities that need to be done here. An organization that I've worked in the past has said, well, we don't have product managers. And I ask, well, how do the teams know what needs to be delivered on a program level or a portfolio level? And they said, well, we're not going to hire someone just to do that. To which I respond, I understand that. I'm not telling you to hire a batch of new people and slap the name program managers on them, or we just need to identify how can the team get that information. And that's what I mean by the functionality of that role. How can the team get that information? Who is responsible for delivering that information to the team? Let's take the role of ceremony. Let's talk about ceremonies, and specifically the role of a Scrum Master. The teams do need someone to coach them locally on agile practices, anti-patterns, and how to avoid them, and certain practices, and during the ceremonies, and a team agreement, and updated the team agreement, and how the team is performing. So if you don't have someone that is titled a Scrum Master, who's responsible for facilitating those events or those ceremonies? Who's responsible for capturing the data to see how the team is performing? Or how do you capture that data? How do you facilitate those meetings? So yes, there's a lot of roles that you will need an individual to fulfill them. And I understand some organizations like to say, well, we don't have that role right now. And I can empathize with the fact that you're not ready to make that decision because you haven't seen the benefit of having someone fulfilling that role. But as a practitioner, as an expert, as someone who works in Agile, it's our job to say, this is what we're lacking. This is what's holding us back from success by not having those functions delivered. And that's the purpose of a dual operating system. Your hierarchy in the company is different than what is your role in delivering value. This is why whenever I go into an organization and I start identifying the gaps as part of my services for the NEXU, the first thing I'd like to start with a value stream. What is your value stream? What are you delivering, and what are those steps that you're taking to deliver that value? And I bring it down to as simple as a taco truck. Let's say if you have a taco truck and if you're selling tacos out of your truck, what are the steps that you take from the minute that you take an order from your customer to the minute that you give them a taco? What's the first thing that you do? What's the second thing? What's the third thing? And so on and so on and so on, right? And you'd be surprised. A lot of people think that it's just as simple as taking the order and making the taco. No, there's a lot more involved. And now, in order for you to service that value stream, what are you doing to make sure that that value stream is operational? There's some stuff that you do behind the scenes to make sure that every one of those steps is functional. So that's why I like to start with a value stream. And you'd be surprised again how many people think it's not just easy, but they don't even know how to articulate how they deliver value. Not just the people that work for the company, not just the practitioners, not just the RTEs, but even the executives and the stakeholders and the business owners. They'll miss some steps. I know for a fact that that is something that happens in almost every organization that thinks they know Agile. They think they know SAFe. They think they know that they went to a workshop for a couple of days and they say, we know Agile, we are experts. We are practicing SAFe. No, you're not. So that's one example of how I identify gaps and identify what's missing and start identifying, well, this bottleneck right here in step 4, how do we identify, how do we address it? And that's why a hybrid model is important. SAFe does barely touch on it. I talk about it in a lot of my classes because as an organization, as a practitioner, as an executive, as a business owner, as a business lead, as a team lead, you need to know, you have to know what are load bearing and what is decorative. What are some of the practices and what are some of the functionalities that are load bearing and what are just they're decorative? I think what I really want people to understand here, DevOps and SAFe are not competing. They coexist in a single organization. They have to. And the connection has to be intentional because without it, things will fail. So I challenge you, if you're listening to this right now, to do this. Map out your current tool and practices against current SAFe practices and see if you can identify 3, but pick one to work on, the one that's most importantly. I promise you, if you start looking at what your current mapping looks like and what the practices are, you're going to say, and be honest, are we really practicing number 1, practicing number 2? Just be honest. Just because if you are going to be passive about it, you're not really giving yourself a chance to succeed. And that's why I say Agile is not broken. We are. We got certified in the most clean version in a very controlled environment where we simulate PI planning and ceremonies and everything. And we talk make believe numbers and size animals and stuff like that. But then when the real world hits, wow, do we do we get a rude awakening, and things for sure get messy and we get overwhelmed. Hybrid operating model is something that the NEXU does very well. It's a program that I created myself because I have not only experienced it, but I've lived it. I implemented it and it works. I know for a fact that you can implement agile practices, agile and safe best practices outside of developing teams, engineering teams, and they work. I've seen it work. That's why I put this program together, Operational Agility. And it is available especially for those organizations that outgrew their safe installation. A lot of organizations, particularly small to medium sized ones, need this part because they're not ready for the whole implementation, the whole full implementation. So, well, that'll do it for us today on Desperate Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. Share this with somebody that might need it. Share it with somebody that could use a certification or struggling with the organization and need to talk to somebody. That's what it's made for. Check out the link below in the comments and let us know. Also, if you like what you heard and if you want to be a guest on the show, or if you want to talk about it some more, or if you have counterpoints to anything that I said, I invite you to come on the show and talk to me about it. I love talking to you about some of these things. I'm an agile nerd. I can't help it. All right, folks. Thank you so much again. This is Haas, and this is Desperate Radio.